In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the worst cases of online dating pairings gone horribly wrong. Now, I'm an old-fashioned romantic and a believer in old-fashioned courting, so the idea of meeting people to date online has never really appealed to me, not even when I was younger. There is something about the idea of selling yourself, or listing your best attributes, or your interests and hobbies, or even taking photos of yourself that you believe make you look appealing, that sends a shiver up my spine. Not only does it all feel too curated to ever be authentic, but it also feels like you're marketing yourself. And that can sometimes come off as one being desperate for validation, which we see every day across social media in subtler forms. But recently, I've done some digging and I've found a plethora of new reasons that reinforce my determination to never succumb to the trend of online dating. And it fills me with a great deal of gratitude that I never, ever downloaded a single dating app, because I've discovered recently that doing so could cost you your life. Blanca Arellano, a 51-year-old Mexican woman, met Juan Pablo Jesus Villafuerte on a gaming app in 2022. After hitting it off, she apparently thought the relationship was worthy of pursuing, so she gleefully flew over 3,000 miles to Peru to meet her new beau. And on October 31st, 2022, Blanca boarded a flight in Mexico City, headed to Lima, Peru. Her final destination was reported to be the beach city of Aucho, which is where Juan lived, and this would be the last place her family ever heard from her, on November 7th, 2002 to be precise. Apparently, for several days between her arrival on October 31st and her final conversation with her niece on November 7th, Blanca reported that things with Juan were going well and that she was in love. Once days passed with no word from Blanca, her niece Carla grew worried and put out a tweet asking for information about her missing relative. The tweet roughly translates to, "I never thought I would be in this situation. Today I asked for support and dissemination to locate one of the most loved and important people in my life. My aunt Blanca disappeared on Monday, November 7th in Peru. She was of Mexican origin. We fear for her life." And things became much more troubling when her niece Carla finally reached out to Juan, since he was the only person Blanca knew in Peru. At that time, he claimed he hadn't been with Blanca for several days, and that she left him because he couldn't offer her the life she wanted. And my God, that was obviously super perturbing for her niece to hear. I just want to point out a few red flags with these cases. A glaring red flag in this case would be flying to meet someone in another country for your first in-person meeting is a terrible idea, even worse than going to that stranger's house in some cases, because not only are you now entering his territory on his terms, but you're also far removed from your own network of friends and family who can't easily get to you if something happens. You're also in a foreign territory where you typically don't know crime statistics of certain areas, and you're unfamiliar with law enforcement procedure, as well as any resources for aid in case of domestic violence situations. This is a terrible idea if you're a woman. Allowing a man to lure you to another country to meet him for the first time has setup written all over it. Juan's last exchange with Blanca's family came in the form of a text message to her niece, which she screenshotted in her Twitter thread about her missing aunt. The hair-raising message simply read, "I hope she is doing well, but my role here is over. I don't know anything else from here, and I'm saying this with sadness. I'm sure her phone is not working, or she's out of battery. Take care, and I hope she gets back home safe." How bone-chilling is it to read things like, "I hope she gets back home safe," from this man, knowing he doesn't mean it, and knowing he's saying it because he's aware that you're fretting over her safety, and that this is what you want most in life, for her to return home safely, but also simultaneously knowing he is directly responsible for the fact that she will never return home again, and that to him, her life was nothing, expendable, but he's putting on pleasantries so that you won't suspect him. That is maniacal beyond belief. The authorities then launched an investigation following the niece's tweet gaining headway, and on November 10th, they made a grisly discovery. A severed finger was found on the beach of Hacho with a silver ring still attached, almost like someone wanted her to be identified. The gore would not end there. According to Vice, a day later, the authorities found a faceless head and then an arm. The next day, a torso without any organs inside, appeared on the same beach. They eventually identified Blanca with her family by the ring on her finger that was recovered. Juan would then be arrested for human organ trafficking. My God, the sickest part of this story isn't even over yet. Believe it or not, Juan was a medical school student and had reportedly been posting on TikTok videos of organs for days following Blanca's disappearance. This is so fucking twisted. Investigators eventually found traces of blood all over his apartment. Juan would go on to be sentenced to 35 years in prison for femicide, which is a prevalent issue in Peru and many places in South America and across the globe, with thousands of women turning up dead or missing each year. They sentenced him so severely to stand in solidarity with the family of the victim and to make an example of those who seek to perpetrate violence against women. Let's hope more is done in that country and many others who have exceedingly high rates of femicide. Carla, Blanca's niece, will later express on Twitter, "We have no words to express what we are experiencing. My aunt was a kind, warm person, full of light, intelligent, dedicated, loving, and that is how she should be remembered." The story of 18-year-old Jacob Williamson is just deeply disconcerting. Promise Edwards was a close friend and roommate of Jacob, who was actually really close to his mother growing up. And Jacob had recently moved in with her in Lawrence County, South Carolina, and this warmed her to her core to know that he was safe and surrounded by loving faces. By late June 2023, Jacob had apparently been speaking online to a guy named Josh Newton for over a month before deciding he wanted to meet him in person. Because Promise expressed concern with him meeting this person for the first time alone, Jacob suggested that she download the family locator safety app called Life 360 so that she can track his location while he was out on his date. This was an excellent precaution taken, although one that would ultimately prove to be insufficient. Promise insisted that she would be quick to call the police if anything went wrong, but Jacob insisted that his date was the sweetest guy ever and that everything would be fine. They apparently planned on going to Carowinds together, which is an amusement park in Charlotte, North Carolina, one state over from where Jacob and Promise lived. That Friday, on June 30th, after Jacob was picked up by his date, Promise became concerned when his phone's location turned off and consequently began calling him back to back. Surprisingly, Jacob answered and insisted he would turn his location back on, and this put Promise's fears at ease momentarily. Jacob's last words were that he loved her, and that would be the final time the two ever spoke again. According to WSOC TV, days later, on July 4th, after Jacob was reported missing, local deputies discovered Jacob's body on the side of Magnum School Road in Chesterfield County, South Carolina, a few miles away from Josh Newton's home in North Carolina. This came after 36 hours of searching. They reported that Josh Newton picked Jacob up in Lawrence County, where he worked at the Waffle House, and then drove him back to where he lived just outside Monroe in North Carolina. And of course, the red flag with this situation is that if you're meeting someone in person for the first time, regardless of how long you've been speaking to them online or on the phone, do not let them pick you up, first of all, because it exposes your address by default, or your place of work, such as in this case with Jacob. And this could later lead to complications for you if the relationship goes south or if it turns out to be a dangerous person. Now they have your address. Always agree to meet mutually at a public location that friends or family are aware of, and have your own ride home secured, independent of your new date. Never get into a car with a stranger, despite how long you've been growing acquainted with them online. And if they're not understanding of these boundaries as the acquaintanceship is still developing, then that's a hint and a half. They're not someone you should be seeking to build a relationship with in any way. Authorities report that Newton ultimately killed Jacob at his trailer, and they suspect he and an accomplice, which was later revealed to be his live-in girlfriend, transported the body across state lines to avoid detection. He was later charged with murder, and his live-in girlfriend, Victoria Smith, was charged with abetting him after the fact. I truly don't understand the motive here. There aren't many details about this case online, except that which I've already reported, so it makes it difficult to make sense of this horrific act, seeing as how this piece of shit, Josh Newton, led Jacob on for over a month, getting close to him and encouraging him to let down his guard, all the while having a girlfriend back home, and only to bring much younger and vulnerable Jacob back to his house to kill him. Apparently, authorities are stating that there isn't enough evidence to deem this a hate crime. However, it will still become yet another statistic to the many that exist of senseless violence perpetrated on LGBTQ people by hateful, bigoted monsters. It's just troubling to think that a couple would plot and plan to mislead and harm someone so innocent and trusting and barely legal, unless it's the case that Josh Newton acted alone and his deranged girlfriend later helped him to cover up the crime. Either way is horrendous and yet another dreadful cautionary tale of why dating online is so hazardous, especially for young people who may not be as discerning as their elders when it comes to judging character and spotting red flags. This last story just guts me completely, as it starts long before anyone would even imagine, and it is perfectly demonstrative of the fact that no matter how long you've spoken to a person online, even through Zoom or FaceTime, you never really know who that person is until you've met them in person. This story begins sometime in 2015, when a 12-year-old girl named Ashley Wadsworth first met a 16-year-old boy named Jack Sepple online. Ashley was from a small town in British Columbia, Canada, called Vernon, and Jack was from a town called Chelmsford in Essex, England. They met on social media through mutual friends and struck up a relationship despite being somewhat opposites of one another, and despite Jack being much older than Ashley. Ashley was a sweet, social teen who played tennis and clarinet and just had a thirst for life and meeting new people. Jack was more of a social recluse who had no friends and was estranged from family members and seemed to be closest to his mother, with whom he lived. Ashley and Jack would go on to speak for years as they grew older and closer to one another, with many fights arising between them, mostly pertaining to Jack's jealousy over Ashley speaking with or possibly dating other guys, despite Jack admittedly dating other girls himself. There was also a strange pattern that emerged as she grew older, which was a glaring red flag that was unfortunately ignored by all. Jack's girlfriends in the UK would sometimes call Ashley, asking her to intervene in their relationship whenever Jack became abusive or aggressive or wouldn't let them leave the house. Ashley would then have to talk some sense into him to help settle the situation, which is bizarre. As it turns out, the girls reached out to Ashley specifically because Jack actually informed all his girlfriends that Ashley was his number one and meant the most to him. By 2018, when he was 20 and Ashley was 16, he even got her name tattooed. I have no words for how many red flags should have been raised in Ashley's mind and her family's. However, as things progressed and it became more and more obvious that Jack was a troubled individual, such as one time slashing a knife through her name tattooed on his body, Ashley began withholding information from her mother, as she knew it would lead her mom to encourage her to break ties with this guy. She only shared things with her closest friends and her sister, who all became suspicious of Jack over time. Despite all these red flags that had cropped up through the years, Ashley still fancied herself in love with Jack and was determined to see him as soon as she could. In this case, her mom really did all she could to deter her, as she refused to allow Ashley to visit him, and Ashley was only able to make this dream a reality once she turned 19 and had worked and saved money and acquired a 6-month tourist visa and booked an extended trip to England. By November 2021, at the age of 19, Ashley flew to London and met directly with Jack for the first time in their 7-year acquaintance. Right away, she snapped a photo of them together and uploaded it to Facebook. And what can be noted in this photo is her effervescent and bubbly spirit and his hardened, tattooed appearance and grim demeanor. From there, Ashley sadly moved in with Jack immediately in a foreign country which she had traveled to completely alone and in a place where she had no network and no real connections. She had attempted to make connections through her involvement with the Mormon Church and linked up with a few people in England, but was only ever able to speak with them virtually, as Jack immediately began restricting her ability to leave the home or to meet new people. These things she of course hid from her family, except for her sister Haley, who she threatened to cut off if she told her mom anything about the dark things Ashley had been experiencing since she met up with Jack in England. And this would include physical violence. A mere few weeks into their relationship, Jack texted his own mother at one point and admitted that he slapped Ashley due to fretting over finding blocked numbers in her phone, which he often checked and snooped through, and Ashley was aware of this. And he assumed these English numbers to be former lovers, so he slapped her. This is completely unhinged and deluded, of course, but his mom ignored these red flags and simply chided him about hitting Ashley but ultimately never did anything to help this girl, despite knowing what she knew about her son's history. This cycle of violence would persist for a while, with Jack being viciously jealous and paranoid, and even once attempting suicide, which he of course used as a way to keep Ashley devoted to caring for him despite his monstrous behavior. But when Jack got really violent, Ashley began reaching out to her sister. One time was in January 2022, in the aftermath of Jack slamming a heavy glass beer mug over her head and then forcing her to clean up the mess. Ashley did so, but called her sister, who heard Jack in the background screaming and speaking unhinged and gritting his teeth. A few more violent incidents occurred, following which Ashley would often state she wanted to go home, but would then retract. On February 1st, however, things became so bad, her sister Haley finally broke down and told her mom what was going on, to which their mom planned an urgent flight to England to see about her daughter Ashley, which sadly wasn't planned for about 2 days' time. She informed Ashley that she was on her way and that if Jack exploded again, to leave him and go straight to the airport. This was a mistake. She should have encouraged her daughter to leave him right then and there, or else called the police herself to go and get her daughter out of harm's way immediately. That same morning, around 9 a.m., Jack destroyed Ashley's phone and hurt her so badly that she ran to a neighbor's house with her hand cut open and bleeding. The woman tried to get her to go to the hospital with her, but Ashley refused and also asked her not to call the police so that they wouldn't upset him further. The neighbor then went over to Jack's apartment to talk some sense into him, following which he apologized. However, later that same morning, around 11 a.m., was the last time Ashley spoke with her family, and the time difference in Canada where they were was about 3 a.m. That same morning, another neighbor stopped by Jack's place to deliver a package that was mistakenly delivered to their home. They noted that he would not open the door all the way, and they didn't think much of it at the time, but thinking back on it, it seemed odd. And since he had destroyed Ashley's phone, she then used Jack's phone to frantically contact her family and tell them she was in danger and that she urgently needed help, but it was in the middle of the night where they were, and no one received these messages. She also tried to contact her Mormon church friends who were located in England, but even they didn't see her messages and calls until hours later. Jack texted his mother around this time to let her know he had beaten Ashley up really badly and possibly broken her arm. From around 11:22 a.m. to around 12:38 p.m., Ashley continued to send frantic messages to her family and friends, begging them to help, but all to no avail. Between 12:38 and 12:45 p.m., Jack strangled Ashley. He then retrieved a knife and stabbed her over 90 times in the chest and abdomen. Sweet and trusting Ashley Wadsworth was now dead, with no one even realizing she was in distress until hours later. Jack would go on to record a demonic video for Ashley's sister, Haley, that he never sent, recording himself apologizing for the murder and talking to her body and telling her he couldn't let go, with the body shown in the frame of the footage. Just purely something out of a horror film. The amount of gore and blood that must have been present with over 90 psychotic stab wounds is difficult to imagine. This is sheer butchery. We can only hope that she wasn't alive for any of them. Jack would later change his Facebook profile to a photo of himself and Ashley months earlier, captioning it "Forever Mine," after he had killed her. During his trial, it would soon be revealed how dark and troubled a past this man had, including multiple incidents of violence and aggression towards his own mother, who at one point had even encouraged him to stay in the relationship with Ashley, despite him admitting to slapping her. And again, this is the very woman who did nothing to assist Ashley or warn her about her son's long documented anger and violence issues and his history of assaulting, imprisoning, and stalking girls, which led to restraining orders and multiple charges. This mother was twisted as fuck. Thankfully, Jack was sentenced to life in prison and must serve at least 23 years before the possibility of parole is available to him. This is one of those stories that will definitely stick with me for a while because it just seems so easy to avoid, because everything should have been done to keep a young girl from falling into a situation like this, and more should have been done to get her out of it once the problems were known. And I wonder why her family didn't intervene sooner, particularly her mom. I wish she'd visited sooner. Anyway, these stories were soul killing, and my heart goes out to the victims and their loved ones.